Step into the extraordinary world of nature's unsung heroes, where a daring mother bear defies the odds to save her cubs amid a fierce winter storm and a sinister poaching ring. This captivating tale will pull you deep into the wilderness, challenge what you think you know about animal intelligence, and reveal a story of survival, courage, and unexpected alliances. What secret message lies behind her tear-filled eyes? Watch closely and join the conversation. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. A winter storm howled across Mountain Ridge Wildlife Center as Alice Parker prepared to close for the night. The temperature had plunged far below freezing, and thick snow blanketed the ground in white sheets. Alice pulled her coat tighter, watching her breath form clouds in the harsh evening air. Something felt different about this night. The animals in their enclosures were unusually quiet, almost as if they were waiting for something. As Alice walked toward the main building, she noticed that the birds had stopped their usual evening calls. The wolves, normally howling at this hour, stood silent at their fence lines, their eyes seemingly fixed on something beyond the center's gates. Alice followed their gaze, squinting through the falling snow. That's when she saw it. A large black bear stood at the main entrance, illuminated by the security lights. Alice's heart raced. In 15 years of working with wildlife, she had never seen anything like this. The bear wasn't acting aggressively or scared. Instead, it paced back and forth, occasionally standing on its hind legs and pressing its paws against the gate in an almost human-like motion. Alice reached for her phone, ready to call emergency services, but something stopped her. The bear's behavior was completely unprecedented. It wasn't trying to break in or showing any signs of aggression. Instead, it kept looking at Alice, then turning its head toward the forest, then back at her again. Its movements were deliberate, almost as if it were trying to tell her something. The security lights cast enough glow for Alice to see the bear's face clearly, and what she saw made her phone slip from her fingers into the snow. The bear's eyes were filled with what could only be described as tears. They rolled down its furry face, freezing in the bitter cold. Alice had heard stories of elephants crying, but never in her entire career had anyone documented a bear showing such emotion. The strange behavior spread through the center like a wave. The resident deer moved closer to their fences, their ears pointed forward in attention. The eagles stopped their evening preening to stare, and even the usually sleepy bears in their enclosures were now fully alert, making soft grunting sounds that Alice had never heard before. The mother bear at the gate continued her unusual display. She would take a few steps away from the gate, look back at Alice with tear-filled eyes, then return. Each time she moved away, she would pause as if expecting Alice to understand. Her gestures became more urgent, more deliberate. She would raise her paw, point it toward the forest, then place it on her chest, over and over. Alice stood frozen, not from the cold, but from the sheer impossibility of what she was witnessing. Years of training told her to follow protocol, to call for backup, and treat this as a potential threat, but her instincts were screaming that this was something entirely different. The bear wasn't threatening, she was begging. The snow fell harder, and the bear's dark fur was covered in white flakes, yet she persisted in her strange behavior. Alice noticed something else too. The bear's movements, though urgent, were careful and measured. She was keeping a consistent distance, making sure not to appear threatening. This wasn't just unusual behavior, it was calculated communication. Other staff had left hours ago due to the worsening storm, leaving Alice alone with this extraordinary situation. The bear's eyes never left her, and those tears kept flowing, creating tiny icicles in her fur. Alice had studied animal behavior her entire career, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The bear was clearly trying to communicate something urgent, something important enough to make her seek human help. The facility's night lights caught the glint of more tears rolling down the bear's face. Alice pulled out her phone again, this time to record this unprecedented behavior. As she filmed, the bear became more animated, as if realizing she finally had Alice's full attention. She repeated her gestures with renewed energy, pointing toward the forest with even more urgency. Alice knew she had to make a decision. Every protocol, every safety regulation, told her to stay inside, call for help, and wait until morning, but there was something in those tears, something in those deliberate movements, that told her waiting wasn't an option. Whatever this bear was trying to communicate couldn't wait until dawn. She reached for her radio, her hands trembling slightly from both cold and anticipation. She needed backup, someone else to witness this incredible event. As she waited for a response, the bear continued her silent plea, her eyes reflecting a desperation that transcended the natural barriers between species. Something extraordinary was happening at Mountain Ridge Wildlife Center, and Alice knew she was about to discover exactly what had driven this mother bear to seek human help on a freezing winter night. The radio crackled with John Lee's response. He was still at his cabin nearby, and despite the worsening storm, he agreed to come immediately. Alice kept her eyes on the mother bear, who waited patiently, occasionally glancing toward the forest before looking back at her. The bear's intelligence shone in every movement as she maintained a perfect distance, not too close to frighten, not too far to lose contact. 10 minutes felt like hours until John Lee's truck lights cut through the snow. Instead of running from the approaching vehicle, the bear stood her ground and repeated her pointing gesture. As John stepped out, he stopped in his tracks, witnessing the extraordinary scene. Alice quickly briefed him, and together they gathered emergency rescue gear, flashlights, and medical supplies. As they stepped toward the gate, the bear's behavior changed. She became more animated, but still maintained her careful movements. When they opened the gate, she started walking toward the forest, stopping every few steps to ensure they followed her. Her path seemed carefully chosen, avoiding deep snow drifts and dangerous ice patches. The storm whirled around them, but the bear led them along what appeared to be the safest route. She would stop at uncertain terrain, waiting for them to carefully cross before continuing. At one point, she even pushed snow aside with her paw to reveal more solid footing underneath. John and Alice exchanged amazed looks. This went beyond normal animal behavior. As they ventured deeper into the forest, something extraordinary happened. A fox emerged from the shadows, falling into step beside them. Then came 2 deer, walking parallel to their path through the trees. Instead of running from the bear, these animals seemed to be joining their procession. The bear showed no aggression toward them, focusing entirely on her mission. Their lights caught something metallic on the bear's ear. John squinted through the snow. "Alice, look, this bear has a tag." They moved their lights closer, and Alice gasped as she made out the number. "Wait, could this be Aurora, the cub we rescued years ago after the forest fire?" The bear turned at the mention of the name, confirming their suspicion. Alice remembered that rescue clearly. Aurora had been found protecting her dying mother, refusing to leave her side. They had raised her at the center before releasing her back into the wild, and now here she was, seeking their help in return. Suddenly, a loud crack pierced the night air. Alice looked up to see a snow-laden branch breaking above her, weighed down by ice. Before she could move, Aurora lunged forward, gently pushing Alice clear. The branch crashed where she had been standing seconds before. The bear had just saved her life. The procession continued, now joined by a pair of wolves who kept their distance yet clearly followed the group. Aurora led them through a part of the forest Alice had never seen, weaving purposefully between trees. The other animals seemed to be helping too, with the deer occasionally stamping their hooves to mark hidden ice patches and the fox darting ahead to scout the path. Aurora's intelligence became even more apparent as she guided them across a partially frozen stream. She tested the ice first, showing them where to step, waiting patiently as they carefully crossed. The other animals crossed at different points but stayed with the group. This wasn't just a journey through the forest, it was turning into something that would challenge everything they knew about wildlife behavior. John checked his GPS, noting they had traveled nearly 2 miles. Aurora's path had been remarkably efficient, avoiding all major obstacles. She showed no signs of the usual bear behavior they were trained to expect. There was no random foraging, no distraction. She moved with single-minded purpose, still occasionally looking back with tear-filled eyes. Their unlikely procession drew more animals. An owl silently glided above them, and a raccoon family emerged from a hollow tree, chittering softly. None showed fear of Aurora or of each other, as if the normal rules of the forest had been suspended. Alice recalled her many years studying wildlife and how they were taught that animals acted purely on instinct. Yet here was Aurora, displaying problem-solving skills and empathy that went far beyond instinct. Aurora stopped suddenly, raised her head, and let out a soft grunt. The other animals became alert too. The fox darted forward, then back, as if confirming something. The wolves stood still, their ears pricked. They were close to something. Through the swirling snow, Alice could make out a clearing ahead. Aurora turned to them, her eyes reflecting the flashlight beams, and made that pointing gesture again, more urgently now. The intelligence they had witnessed during this journey was impossible to dismiss. Aurora had not only sought help but had shown them the safest path through a dangerous storm. She had protected them, communicated with them, and somehow united other forest animals in her mission. As they stood at the edge of the clearing, Alice realized they were about to discover what had driven this extraordinary bear to demonstrate such unprecedented behavior. Looking at Aurora, Alice saw more than just a bear they had once rescued. She saw an intelligent being who remembered human kindness and had returned seeking help, showing abilities far beyond what science had thought possible. The bear's eyes held both intelligence and desperation as she looked toward the clearing. Whatever they were about to discover would change everything they thought they knew about wildlife. The clearing opened before them, and their flashlight beams revealed a horrifying scene. At its center was a partially frozen pond, but this was no natural winter tragedy. Metal glinted beneath the ice, the unmistakable shine of steel traps scattered across the pond's bottom. Through the clearer patches of ice, they could see 2 cubs, their small bodies caught in these underwater death traps. Alice's stomach churned as she took in more details. The ice around the pond showed signs of tampering, deliberately thinned in places to create a deadly trap. Empty food containers were scattered nearby, used to lure unsuspecting animals toward the pond. This was a professionally set poaching operation designed to catch any animal desperate enough to approach the water. Aurora moved closer to the pond's edge, her movements now revealing exhaustion. Looking closer, Alice noticed marks around the pond's perimeter, signs that the mother bear had tried everything to break through the ice herself. There were also tracks from other animals deeper in the snow, suggesting that Aurora had sought help from elsewhere before turning to humans as a last resort. John discovered a hastily abandoned campsite nearby. Coffee cups were still warm in the snow, boot prints leading to a hidden vehicle track. The poachers had been here recently, probably scared away by the approaching group and their lights. Empty shell casings littered the ground, along with more disturbing evidence. Photos scattered near the campfire showed other successful trapping sites. This wasn't an isolated incident. The cubs' movements had grown weaker, their small paws occasionally pressing against the ice. Alice's flashlight beam caught something else through the ice, a network of ropes and cables connecting the traps. This was an elaborate setup designed to snare anything that broke through the thin ice. The cubs had fallen victim to just one part of a larger poaching operation. Aurora circled the pond again, her tear-streaked eyes now frozen to her fur. Every few steps, she would stop and touch the ice with her paw, showing them different spots where her cubs were trapped. The intelligence she displayed was heartbreaking. She understood exactly what had happened and had somehow known that only humans could undo what other humans had done. Evidence of earlier rescue attempts lay around the pond. Broken branches showed where Aurora had tried to reach her cubs. Marks in the ice revealed failed attempts to break through, and small animal tracks in the snow suggested other forest creatures had also tried to help, explaining why they had joined the procession to bring humans here. Alice found a hunter's logbook half buried in the snow. Its pages revealed something even more sinister. This trap site was one of many, part of an organized poaching ring operating throughout the region. The poachers had been tracking Aurora specifically, knowing she was a tagged bear. They had used her maternal instincts against her, setting up their trap where they knew she would bring her cubs to drink. The scene told a story of desperation. Aurora had discovered her cubs trapped hours ago, maybe even days. She had tried breaking the ice herself, had possibly sought help from other bears, and had attempted everything possible before making the extraordinary decision to seek human help. The tracks around the pond showed her countless attempts and her refusal to abandon her cubs. John's discovery of a fresh tire track suggested an even more urgent situation. The poachers would return, probably with reinforcements, once they realized their trap had worked. This wasn't just about saving the cubs anymore. It was about exposing and stopping a cruel operation that had been terrorizing the forest wildlife. Aurora stood at the pond's edge, looking between her cubs and the humans she had brought to help. Her eyes held both trust and urgency. She understood they were her cubs' last hope, and somehow, she had known exactly which humans to ask for help. The tag in her ear marked her as one of their success stories, a rescued cub who had grown up to be an extraordinary mother. The complexity of the trap setup spoke of professional poachers who knew exactly what they were doing. They had counted on animal behavior being predictable and instinctive. They hadn't counted on a mother bear's intelligence, her ability to remember humankind, or her courage to seek help from the very species that had caused this tragedy. As Alice and John assessed the situation, Aurora's earlier tears began to make sense. This wasn't just physical pain she was showing, but a deeper understanding of betrayal. Humans had saved her as a cub, and now humans had tried to destroy her own cubs. Yet she had still trusted enough to seek human help, showing a level of emotional and logical thinking that would challenge every scientific paper ever written about bear behavior. Alice and John began setting up their rescue equipment, working quickly in the harsh winter night. They brought out ice saws, rescue ropes, and their medical kit. The situation was dire. The cubs' movements were becoming weaker, and the ice around the traps was starting to refreeze in the bitter cold. Aurora watched intently as they tested the ice's thickness. When Alice moved toward a thin spot, the bear gently pushed her back, guiding her to a stronger section. John secured the rescue ropes around himself while Alice anchored the other end to a sturdy tree. As he began cutting through the ice, their flashlights revealed something horrifying. There weren't just two cubs trapped. Other creatures moved beneath the ice, more animals caught in this cruel trap. Halfway through the cutting process, Aurora suddenly became alert. Her ears perked up, and she turned toward the forest. The other animals that had accompanied them also sensed something. The wolves disappeared into the shadows, and the fox darted behind a snowbank. Distant engine sounds broke through the storm. The poachers were returning. John worked faster, the ice saw sending shards flying as Alice kept watch. Aurora positioned herself between the approaching sounds and the rescue operation, her massive form acting as a protective barrier. The fox reappeared briefly, darting toward the vehicle tracks, then disappeared again. It was almost as if the forest creatures were coordinating their efforts. The first ice block came free, revealing, in one of the underwater traps, the mechanism was sophisticated, designed to prevent escape. Once triggered, as John reached down to free the first cub, headlights appeared through the trees. Aurora stood her ground but made no aggressive moves. Instead, she began making loud noises, drawing attention to herself. Alice quickly called the local authorities on her emergency radio, but help would take time in this storm. Just as John lifted the first cub free, 3 trucks burst into the clearing. The poachers emerged, armed and angry, but stopped short at the bizarre scene before them. Their headlights illuminated Aurora, standing protectively near the humans who were rescuing her cubs. The fox's earlier disappearance suddenly made sense. As police sirens wailed in the distance, the clever animal had somehow led the authorities to their location. The poachers found themselves surrounded, not just by law enforcement, but by a united front of forest animals. Wolves emerged from multiple directions while deer blocked the vehicle's escape routes. As the police arrived, John and Alice continued their rescue work. Aurora now moved actively to help, using her strength to push away ice chunks they had cut. The second cub came free, but they discovered 3 more animals in the traps, a young deer, a fox kit, and a wolf pup, all victims of the poachers' indiscriminate cruelty. The poachers' arrest led to an even bigger discovery. Their trucks contained documents of a massive wildlife trafficking operation, maps marked with other trap sites across several states, along with records of international buyers. What had started as a desperate mother bear seeking help had unveiled one of the largest poaching rings in the region's history. State wildlife officers arrived as Alice and John worked to free the remaining trapped animals. Aurora stayed close to her cubs, who were now wrapped in thermal blankets, but she continued helping with the other rescues. She seemed to understand that all the trapped animals needed saving, showing empathy that extended beyond her own family. The rescue operation revealed more about the poachers' methods. They had studied the animals' habits, used their natural behaviors against them, and exploited their trust. What they hadn't counted on was the intelligence and cooperation of the forest creatures or the incredible bond between a once-rescued bear and her human saviors. As the last animal was freed, the full scope of the operation became clear. The poachers had created an intricate network of traps throughout the forest, using the frozen pond as just one of many cruel hunting grounds. Their documents revealed an operation that had been running for years responsible for the disappearance of countless animals. Aurora gathered her cubs close as they received emergency care. The young ones were hypothermic but alive, their survival a testament to their mother's extraordinary actions. The other rescued animals were quickly transported to emergency veterinary care, their chances of survival now greatly improved thanks to Aurora's decision to seek human help. State wildlife officers began documenting everything, taking photographs and collecting evidence. What they found painted an even darker picture. Hidden cameras had been placed around the pond, recording the animals' suffering for potential buyers who wanted proof of the trapping methods. The level of organization and cruelty was beyond anything they had seen before. Local police discovered sophisticated communication equipment in the poacher trucks. Radio frequency scanners suggested they had been monitoring police and wildlife service channels. They had even hacked into the wildlife center security systems, explaining how they knew about Aurora's history and her connection to humans. As the rescue operation continued, more forest animals emerged from the darkness. They formed an almost protective circle around the clearing as if standing guard. The wolves that had accompanied them earlier now watched the arrested poachers with unwavering attention. Each time one of the criminals moved, a low growl reminded them to stay still. John and Alice worked with the emergency veterinary team that had finally arrived. Each freed animal required careful handling. The traps had been designed with barbed mechanisms, making removal extremely delicate. Aurora stayed close, seemingly understanding the rescue process. When one of the sedated animals needed moving, she would carefully help push them onto the rescue sleds. The weather continued to worsen, but now it worked in their favor. The storm had trapped the poachers in the clearing, preventing any escape attempts. More evidence emerged as the police searched their vehicles thoroughly. International bank statements, coded messages, and, most disturbingly, orders for specific animals from private collectors around the world. A wildlife forensic team arrived and began analyzing the trap mechanisms. They found fingertip-sized pressure plates that would activate only under the right weight, explaining why smaller animals could walk on the ice safely while larger ones would fall through. The technology involved suggested government-level resources, hinting at corruption in high places. Aurora's cubs started showing signs of improvement under emergency care. Their body temperatures slowly rose, and they began responding to treatment. Yet Aurora's attention remained divided between her cubs and helping with the other rescues. She seemed especially concerned about the wolf pup, often checking on its progress and gently nudging the warming blankets closer around it. The operation had evolved from a simple rescue into a massive crime scene investigation. Federal agents arrived, their presence indicating the significance of what had been uncovered. The poachers' credentials were found to be forgeries, and their true identities raised red flags in multiple international databases. Throughout all this activity, the most remarkable sight remained Aurora's behavior. She moved seamlessly between the emergency teams, acting almost as a coordinator between the human rescuers and the forest animals. When a rescue worker needed to approach an injured animal, Aurora would make soft sounds that seemed to calm them, making treatment possible. As dawn approached, the full impact of the night's events began to emerge. This wasn't just a local poaching operation. They had stumbled upon evidence pointing to an international wildlife trafficking ring that had operated undetected for years. Aurora's desperate quest for help had not only saved her cubs but had exposed a criminal enterprise that had been terrorizing wildlife across multiple states. The events at Mountain Ridge Wildlife Center became international news within hours. News helicopters circled the area as morning broke, capturing footage of Aurora still helping the rescue teams with the last of the recovery efforts. The image of a mother bear working alongside humans struck a chord with people worldwide. Within days, the video of Aurora leading humans through the storm had been viewed millions of times, sparking global conversations about animal intelligence. National Geographic arrived within days to document this unprecedented case of animal intelligence and cooperation. Their cameras captured Aurora's continued visits to the wildlife center where her cubs were recovering. Her behavior challenged every known study about bear intelligence. She would wait patiently during treatments, communicate through consistent gestures, and even learn to use basic tools like pushing blankets with her paws to help other injured animals. The magazine's cover story, "The Bear Who Changed Our Understanding of Wildlife," became their most read article of the year. Scientists from major universities flocked to Mountain Ridge. They studied footage from that remarkable night, documenting how Aurora had not only sought human help but coordinated with other forest animals. The discovery that she remembered her own rescue and understood that humans could help in a crisis launched new studies into animal memory and emotional intelligence. Research teams from around the world set up observation posts near the center, gathering data that would reshape our understanding of wild animals. The poaching case exposed by Aurora's actions led to sweeping changes in wildlife protection laws. Congress passed the Shadow Act, implementing stricter penalties for poaching and increasing funding for wildlife protection. The act also established new guidelines for wildlife centers, recognizing that animals might seek human help in emergencies. International wildlife organizations adopted similar measures, creating a global network of protection inspired by one bear's extraordinary actions. Aurora and her cubs remained at the center during their recovery, providing unprecedented research opportunities. Scientists observed her showing problem-solving abilities never before seen in bears. She could understand simple verbal commands, recognize different rescue workers by their uniforms, and even learn to use basic tools like pushing blankets with her paw to help other injured animals. Each day brought new revelations about her cognitive abilities, forcing scientists to rewrite textbooks on animal intelligence. Multiple universities launched dedicated research programs studying animal cognition in ways they had never considered before. Research papers documented Aurora's extraordinary mental capabilities. She showed empathy not just for her own cubs, but for other injured animals. Trail cameras later captured her in the forest, teaching her cubs to avoid dangerous areas and even leading other animals away from potential traps. Her intelligence suggested that bears might have cognitive abilities far beyond what science had imagined. The case revolutionized wildlife research as scientists began looking for similar signs of intelligence in other rehabilitated animals. They discovered that many animals showed higher levels of reasoning and emotional understanding than previously believed. Aurora had opened a door to understanding animal intelligence in entirely new ways. Research grants for animal cognition studies increased tenfold in the year following her story, and conservation efforts worldwide gained unprecedented support. Aurora's story inspired a new generation of wildlife protectors. Donations poured into wildlife centers, and volunteer numbers soared. People began seeing animals not just as creatures of instinct, but as intelligent beings capable of complex thought and emotion. Aurora became a symbol of hope, showing that the gap between humans and wildlife might not be as wide as once thought. The long-term impact stretched beyond scientific research. Her story found its way into school curriculums, teaching children about animal intelligence and conservation. Wildlife centers around the world began training their staff to recognize signs of animals actively seeking human help. Several cases emerged of other animals, particularly those previously rehabilitated, approaching humans for assistance. A new field of study emerged, focusing on animal-human cooperation in crisis situations. Perhaps most significantly, Aurora's legacy lived on through her cubs. As they grew, they showed the same remarkable intelligence. They remained wild but maintained a special connection with the center. Occasionally, they would appear at the gates when other animals needed help, continuing their mother's extraordinary legacy of bridging the gap between humans and wildlife. Their behavior confirmed that this wasn't a one-time miracle but perhaps the first glimpse into a new understanding of the animal mind. In the end, this remarkable journey reminds us that even in the darkest moments, the spirit of resilience and the power of empathy can light the way. Let this story inspire you to protect and cherish the wonders of the wild. If you found this tale as moving as we did, please like, comment, and share the video to keep the discussion alive and help spread the word about the incredible bond between humans and wildlife.